Since 2004, Rebecca has played a pivotal role in shaping the organization into a national leader in supporting cancer survivors in the workplace. A subject matter expert featured in esteemed publications and media outlets, Rebecca's advocacy efforts have led to the launch of numerous impactful programs and services. Please join me in welcoming Rebecca V. Nellis.
Great. Is there a clicker for the slides or someone doing the slides? Okay, great. Even better. I don't have to be responsible for that. Hello. I know we're short on time and I want to get to my awesome panel. So I'm just going to walk you through a couple of key slides. If we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. For those of you who aren't familiar with Cancer and Careers, if you sort of take one thing away from my part of this conversation we're about to have, it's that there's actually an organization that has been around for nearly 25 years focused on the work issues that come up after a cancer diagnosis. And so if you or someone in your sphere is expressing complexity around how to figure out the practical and psychosocial and emotional components of how your work plays a role in your cancer story and in your life. We are here and we have been doing this for a long time. And so hopefully you'll find some good support and referrals if we are not the right place. Next slide, please. So just quickly, you can see some of the things that we offer. I'm going to point specifically to our monthly webinars, which are really targeted. Everything we offer to patients, survivors, caregivers, thrivers, however you want to refer to yourself, and the healthcare professionals who serve them are free of charge. So you don't ever have to worry that there's a barrier to accessing credible quality information. We also do 3 conferences a year. They used to be physically in person, and maybe one day again they will be, but currently they are all virtual. So it really means whichever one works in your schedule is the best one for you these days. And all that information is on our website. And I will just sort of highlight one of our really unique one-on-one programs. We do a free resume review service. So if you are like, I don't know, my resume is a little old, or I don't know how to shine the light on the things I'm most interested in doing now, or I haven't looked for a job in a really long time, where do I even start? You can get access to a free review of your resume. We also have financial assistance programs and technology assistance programs where we give out laptops. So there's a really wide spectrum of support, information, and programming to offer. Next slide, please. Whew. So to tee us up for the conversation we're going to have with my awesome panelists, I just want to sort of center us together in the work part of this conversation. I've been at Cancer and Careers for 20 years next month, which is hard to wrap my head around as I think about it, and it's been extraordinary. And one of the things that I am still talking about today that I was talking about 20 years ago are these misconceptions about work. That people who've been diagnosed don't want to work, or that they can't work, or that they won't be as productive, or that if you think about how to accommodate one person, you have to accommodate everybody in the same way for this in the workplace, or that treatment side effects are the same for everyone. So if you've ever had an experience, it means it's going to be exactly like that for your coworker or your direct report. So these misconceptions are still the thing we're battling every day in this conversation, because each individual person is going to bring their own individual skills, complexities, abilities, and needs to the workplace, and we want the workplace to react more accordingly to that. Next slide. So we do data every year with the Harris poll to make sure that we are not just hearing individual stories day to day, but that we're collecting a snapshot of the experience of work after cancer. And I really point to this today as we move to the conversation we're about to have, because it's part of how we dispel those misconceptions. And hearing the lived experience in the aggregate is very powerful for people. And it can also help validate people who maybe didn't feel like there was anyone else facing these work issues. And then they come to one of our programs and realize that even if it's not in their community, there is a community of people dealing with the work-related issues. And as you can see, the data supports the idea that while finances and insurance are critical, and you just heard on the last panel how critical and how complicated, and our community is saying that too, There are other reasons people work: for a sense of purpose, for a sense of belonging, for a sense of normalcy as part of their identity. That work for some people, in fact, some pretty high majorities, found that it helped them cope, or it aided in their recovery, whatever that meant to them. And so it's really important to, again, push against those assumptions and really look at what people who have lived this experience are telling us. Next, and I believe my last slide before we chat, is this. So because we're going to have a conversation with two people who are going to share their story, and I know that's been going on all day and will continue tomorrow, I wanted to take a moment to talk about disclosure. It's a highly personal choice. And someone's feelings can also change, whether it's to become more open about what's going on with them or to pull back on what they had been articulating and sharing. And there is no right or wrong decision about disclosure, but there can be unintended outcomes if someone doesn't think it through in an ongoing way and check in with themselves about it. And so I also want to say, if you're someone who opts out or decides to be more private about your experience, it doesn't mean you can't advocate for yourself and others. You just might be doing it less publicly. And it's important to remember that we need all of those voices in the conversation to make good change, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be front and center visibly on your social media to be making change. And I think that's important, and it can sometimes be forgotten. What you're comfortable with is really important in this dialogue, particularly when you think about the work part of this conversation. So those are my slides. Where's my panel? Let's go. I don't know if I've ever talked so fast. Tamika, don't make fun of me because I've definitely talked faster. I can feel you somewhere going, you've talked faster than that.
Please welcome Morgan Newman and Davina Woolward to the stage.
Oh, but I need my questions. But you are going to introduce yourselves a little bit, yes? Okay, great.
You just let me know.
You go. We don't have time to burn. Talk to the people.
So my name is Morgan, and I serve as the community engagement liaison here at Survivor. I was diagnosed when I was 24 years old, and I am going on 8 years cancer-free this year. I'll save a little bit for our conversation. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Davina Woolward, and I'm all the way from the beautiful country Guyana, which is located in South America. So I would like to say that I am delighted and overwhelmed to be here with my fellow Teal sisters at the summit. And the irony of my story is that I'm the first and former therapist of the Cancer Institute of Guyana. So I know what it is to treat the disease and to be treated for the disease. And I will go on to say I was diagnosed in 2020 with stage 2B squamous cell carcinoma. Subsequently, I was treated definitively with radiation, chemo, and brachytherapy. And my mission now is to become the best advocate I can be, to advocate for other women out there who has no knowledge of this disease. And I would like to say I received some sad news today. I lose one of my good friends to breast cancer today. So I'm a bit sad, so please bear with me if I lost my thought sometimes. Thank you.
Pat, for me too. This is a safe space. You'll just tell us what you do or don't want to answer as we get there.
Okay.
So both of you are sitting here in part because you were working when your diagnosis happened, and your diagnosis impacted the kind of work you wanted to be engaged in. But before we get too far down that path, I did just share some data about why people want to work, like what it means to them. But data can only tell us so much, and you all have your own stories about why you did or didn't work, and they're all valid. But we're going to sit here and hear a little bit from you two about what choices you made. Why did you work? And I know you, Morgan, you're going to need to tell them we're in the middle of school and work and a diagnosis all at once. So let's maybe start there.
Yeah, so I was a dental assistant newly out, probably 3 years. And then I had decided I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life because I don't know. I didn't feel fulfilled. So I ended up going back to school for social work, and I was my second semester back, and I received the news that I had cervical cancer. And so I went through treatment, continued to do full-time school, and I did full-time work. There were times where I wasn't making it into work because I was so sick. But there was a part that I felt like I could hide my illness because I didn't lose my hair the first time. And then, continuing through school, I ended up having a recurrence nearly a year later in my lungs, which made me stage 4 and greatly impacted my chances of being cancer-free. I finished my treatment for that round, and it was 2 weeks before my bachelor's in social work program. I continued that full time and continued to work, but I did have the courage after to change my office that I worked for. And I had a more accepting environment where I had a very toxic one that I had prior. And then master's is a whole nother thing. So
Sure is. But let me just dig a little bit deeper for a second. I'm assuming there was a degree of necessity to work and school, but what else drove you to keep both of those things going simultaneously? Because that's a pretty heavy
yeah,
load.
yeah. Well, obviously living paycheck to paycheck because I'm a young adult and facing my own bills for basically the first time in my life, but also to look forward to something and to be able to feel like I was still going to be here.
Yeah.
That was really what drove me to continue to work, and I think why I sometimes overwork myself too.
We're going to come back to the toxic work environment in a minute, but Davina, give us a little insight. You were working at the time of your diagnosis.
Yes, I was working at our regional hospital as a CT scan technician.
And did you continue to work during treatment, or were you able to step away? Did you want to step away?
I was on sick leave because I had to travel from the region I was living in to the city to get my treatment. So I had the first phase of my treatment in Guyana. The second phase, I had to travel to Suriname for the brachytherapy. And ever since, being a radiation staff and know that we all have this myth about radiation, sometimes it kills, sometimes it cures. So I resigned. And basically, I've been studying, doing online studies. Now I'm back at the hospital doing part-time, and I'm doing full-time advocating in my community.
So that sounds like a balance you're happy about.
Yes, but there's still more that I need to get done.
Yeah.
And I'm reaching for that.
Yeah. So would you say that your experience changed your lens and gave you a different sort of purpose?
Yes, it is. My life has always have purpose, but it's even more purposeful now because I know that I can change things. I've recently did a declaration with our deputy mayor, who's a female, and I've had all the other leaders in my community endorse it. So, and I'm the brainchild behind the inaugural cervical cancer awareness rally in my community. So that is going to be ongoing every year, and the leaders are going to support me. And our government has recently set aside billions of dollars for the interventions for cancer treatment. And we're going to be having every woman between the age of 21 to 65, the government is sponsoring cervical cancer tests.
That's incredible. Can we have So that's a nice segue to Morgan is no longer a dental assistant, and is in fact also been driven to work in a space for change.
100% on that. So I think it took COVID to really push me out. I was finishing my master's degree part-time, and I was to graduate May of 2021. And when COVID hit, it just put me back in that space of, I have to quarantine, I have to take care of myself. I feel like I'm back in treatment. So that wasn't good for my mental health. And I ended up putting my resignation in after 5 years. With the office, I was managing 2 smaller rural Iowa offices. And I ended up working as a virtual outreach counselor for COVID Recovery Iowa. And that was a year or so worth of work. And then an opportunity came up with Survivor. And I am forever grateful to Tamika for giving me the opportunity to serve the community, because this is a passionate line of work, and we're doing good work.
I think it also, both of you are speaking to taking skills you had and learning new skills simultaneously to be able to affect change. But I am going to play the role that I play, which is not everyone wants to, should, or has to decide that this is what makes meaning for them after a diagnosis. You can find meaning in so many different things, so many parts of your life and your work life. And we get a lot of people who come to us to talk about career shifts or career change. And that doesn't always mean this very front and center work, which doesn't mean it's not also meaningful. You might find meaning in a particular skill that you really want to be able to use more of, but you actually spend your whole life doing Excel and that no longer works for you, right? I'm always blaming Excel. I feel like I should own it. Like anytime I have to sort of talk about something that I wouldn't want to do all the time, there are people in my office who love Excel. So I don't know why I'm beating up on Excel for all of you. But I think it's important to remember that we have 2 examples today, and they're such compelling stories of personal experience driving additional professional opportunity, growth, advocacy. But these are just 2 examples, and so many people continue on in the professional path they picked originally that actually did derive meaning for them, and cancer became a part of that story. It didn't change that story. And so I'm always cautious to just sort of remember that I'm so inspired by both of you. And obviously I picked a line of work that allows me to do something that is mission aligned for me, but mission is different for everyone. And it's super important to reflect for yourself, take that inventory for yourself around that when you think about it. So that's my little soapbox on that. And while we're talking about my soapboxes, before I get cut off on time, I think disclosure is a really big conversation. And I think you 2 are open books here in this room, and so many of you are, but were there any moments where you thought about it, where you made an active choice about what sharing this experience was going to mean? Obviously, very good things for the change, Davina, that you're making at home, but also it does create outcomes for you too, with people knowing everything about you maybe, or doing a Google search and immediately knowing things that maybe you wouldn't have shared on a first meeting, interview, date, fill in the blank.
I would say, yeah, I did think about it, mainly because the only other person that I knew had cervical cancer was someone who went to school with me. She was a senior, a mother to 2 children, and she died at the age of 27 because of her cancer. And I thought that was my fate. And then I went on, it was after I had finished treatment that I stumbled across a hashtag on Instagram and found Survivor. Went to Survivor School, our premier program, and for patient advocacy. And that is where I was given permission to basically be who I am today. I was told it wasn't my fault. And, I was stuck in a bunch of shame and under the stigma. So it truly takes that thought. And had I not, I don't know if I would be sitting here today.
What about you, Davina? I know you also went to Survivor School, right?
Yes, I did. And
just a little
I
plug
was
here for
so
Survivor School.
privileged. So Tamika, you're magnificent. And to all the other women of Survivor and the mentors, You guys are phenomenal. So for me, it is a disease that carries a stigma. I'm from a small community, so I've thought about it. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to do this. It's all about what you become and who you become after you're a survivor, right? So I am more driven now to do this. It's a mission that I'm going to see through. And whomever I can get the help from, I would really, really appreciate it. And to put the icing on top of it, losing my friend, you know, I'm going to do this for her because she was one of the women whose voice was not heard.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter the color of the ribbon. I'm an advocate for any color ribbon. And I have initiated and teamed up with a prostate cancer survivor. We have already pulled off a prostate cancer rally, and we're going to be heading to our second one September.
That's fantastic. So this leads me though, and I probably need some reflection on this myself. We're passionate about our work, we're invested in our work, but how do we make sure there's still balance in our lives? Got any tips?
Oh, God, no. I'm the worst offender of this, and I think the team would agree. But I do take some time to be with my boyfriend, my partner, and our 2 fur children. We have a camper van to go escape and travel for a little bit and change our scenery. And even that helps. Working from a different environment from time to time helps. So that in a sense is one of my self-care tips.
Well, for me, I have to find it because I'm also a wife, a mother. I find time to go to the gym. I find time to go to church, to spend with my immediate family, and time for myself is very important. And my time is my time alone, where I lock myself in my room and just let myself go with my television. That's it.
Oh yeah, I'm one of those.
I enjoy my alone time.
Yeah. So Morgan, you alluded to a toxic work environment during your first treatment experience. So rather than dwell on what made it toxic, although I'm sure you could talk my ear off and I could support you in a conversation around that, I guess I'd like you to flip the switch on that and think about what would have been good. Like what would have been the right approach or the more human approach that we can share and sort of have people think about as they're reflecting on their own work experiences or what to expect from an employer. P.S. Cancer and Careers does a lot of work with employers and they have a lot of work to do.
So I think empathy is a skill that can be learned by anyone. And to have an employer that had a parent that went through cancer, I didn't get that empathy. So it's hard. It's hard because it's trying to change others and we can't. So I'm at a loss a little bit for that.
What did you need though? What apart empathy? Yes. And it can be taught and we spend a lot of time on that, but like what, you know, because part of the challenge is people are often like, well, even in a supportive work environment, they're like, whatever you need. And the person is like, I can't answer that for you. I need you to help me figure out what I can have and how I can use it and how much of it I can use. And then I'll tell you in response to all of that information, what I'm going to do. So like, was there something in specific when you recall that time besides a more human, empathetic approach that would have just made your day-to-day?
Maybe, you know, if they noticed I looked a little green, to maybe go home and take some extra rest. You know, I went to radiation 5 days a week on my lunch hour over in West Des Moines, about 20-30 minutes away. And so my whole lunch hour was spent there receiving radiation. So just having a little extra time to get to and from probably would have been great.
So what you're describing is greater flexibility and a less rigidness approach to how work gets done and when it gets done. I just wanted the example of it because of course, of course, there are certain jobs and certain moments where flexibility is an unrealistic expectation and you need to strategize how to work through that and around it. But often it isn't, it's just a lens. And it goes back to one of those misconceptions that if I do for Morgan, I have to do for everyone. But Morgan may, in fact, be entitled to that. As you heard from Joanna Duran before, there are laws. So there's so many pieces of this puzzle, and it is so frustrating that you become someone who needs to know all of those pieces to create the path forward, which is why organizations like Cancer and Careers and Triage and everyone you're hearing from exist, is to kind of help you get to those questions and those solutions faster.
So when you're young too, you don't have the work experience like that, that others may have. You're afraid to ask the questions.
Yep.
You're kind of like hiding and just trying to figure out how to survive.
I still don't understand my health insurance, and I'm a long way down the road now. So yes, absolutely. Davina, what you're working part-time now, does that mean you have the flexibility you need to take care of you and take care of the advocacy work and take care of your family? Is that balance better?
Yes. Yes. And I can
Still
survive
sounds
that
busy
way.
to me.
I can survive that way.
Okay.
All right. With the part-time. And like I said, I'd rather work part-time and advocate full-time because that's my purpose now. Right? I may not be able to render my service in the radiation field, but I can render it being a advocate in my community. I know that I will make an impact on, even if it's one woman's life, and I've started something good. All I need is the support. And once the support is there, we are going to decrease the mortality rate of cervical cancer.
Well, I was told to wrap it up, and I can't wrap it up any better than that. So thank you all. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me here.
We have some time for questions from the audience. That's why we wanted to wrap up just a little bit.
I'm sorry. Apparently, I can't read the signs. I just saw this, and I was like, got it.
Wrap it up.
So anybody have any questions from the audience?
What was the request?
Combine the Q&A.
So if we want to have the previous panel come up. Yeah. Does anyone have a question?
Tamika wants short, tight, concise questions so everyone has a chance, and she wants as many of the panelists that didn't have their Q&A happen up here so we can have a comprehensive conversation. Did I get it? 20 years, baby.
Questions from the audience? Oh, come on. Seriously, come on.
Hi, Larissa Sellers again, Oklahoma City. What I struggle with most is identity, and you guys touched on that a lot. And I was an educator for my whole career, and I am no longer an educator. I chose to not work and was able to have that, which is wonderful. But now I feel lost and like I don't have an identity. So can you relate? Do you feel similar? And I don't know, do you just have any advice for me on that?
I feel like I had to do a little soul searching on what I wanted to do. Before I went back to school for social work, I started going to therapy, and I wanted to help with mental health. Then I found out the vast ways that an MSW would cover, and I changed to criminology because it was fantastic MSW with that. But ultimately my heart landed with nonprofit work because of what Survivor School did for me. So I know mine's very personal, but if you do a little soul searching, it could happen.
I would also just say, my heart broke a little bit when you said that, because you do still have a whole host of identities. All those skills and experiences are sitting inside of you. And the question is, what do you want to do with them next? And if you can reframe the question to be something exciting and thrilling, which is what's next with all of that, that doesn't go away. Like, you didn't leave those someplace else because of everything else that came whirling over your life like a wave, right? Of course. And I am absolutely not taking away that feeling. What I want to do is say it's still there, and being reminded that it's there, and asking yourself, with all of that superpower, where do you want to direct that, could be really exciting. You seem to be saying here. So we seem to have, so then it's, who do I need to know, and who do I need to connect with, and what do I want to do? This goes back to my Excel beating up. What of those skills and experiences do I actually want to use in this next phase that I still want to have attached to my identity? And what are the ones that I'm like, you know what, if I never have to do Y again, that's cool with me. And then you start, this is a networking I hate to be this person, but I'm the cancer and careers person here. This is a networking opportunity. You are literally in a room with people who you can build ideas with and create pathways to and think about new things with and contribute. I mean, you know Morgan now. So if this isn't space you want to be in, and now you know more, right? You need to, it feels icky, but if you put that lens on it, you're sitting in a room of opportunity also. Sorry, everyone. Did anyone else want that one? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Cindy Trice, and I have a question about how you're speaking to employers. I mean, I know, like with workers' comp, right? They're required to put that up there so you can understand what your rights are. But are there efforts being made for people to understand what their rights are as a patient? Do they go in employee handbooks? Like how would Morgan ever have known, what her rights were, besides just by some stroke of luck getting connected to your organization or having someone tell her about that?
So you're asking a great question. I think the rights question is an interesting way to frame it, because to a degree, you don't know what you don't know until you need to know it, right? And so that's very true about things like this. But in terms of employer work, we're going in and training managers on empathy. We're talking about trust building. We're talking about the kinds of things you should expect a manager to be able to answer and the kinds of things you shouldn't, because there are things that a manager is not the person for. And most managers have never been trained to be a manager. They just one day woke up with some direct reports who were humans and had no idea what to do with them outside of the work product. So how do we evolve the thinking on what a manager understands and what HR understands, and whether policies and benefits that the leadership thinks are working are actually working for the humans using them? So we're conducting focus groups in companies to get real stories about the internal workings of that company and what worked and didn't for their employees. But on a broader scale, that's one of the things. But on a broader scale, there is a degree of immediate self-education. There is. And I imagine that many of you in this room would align with that. I wish it wasn't so. I wish a need for cancer and careers didn't exist, because there was no stigma in the workplace and employers were all perfect. And I don't know what I would do, but it would, I think, include a hammock and an island, maybe. But it's really a reality that the burden often falls on the person. The person is educating their workplace, and we are trying to change that systemically, but that's company by company, and every company is different. So on a day-to-day basis, we're trying to equip all of you to know what you should be thinking about, what you want to consider. What's right for you is not going to be the same for someone else in their weird employee fiefdom, right? The dysfunction of one is not the same as the dysfunction of another. And I say this working with phenomenal employers who are really trying. It is complicated to scaffold out this level of support. You may have a bad manager somewhere in the pool, and that's the person who Morgan gets to work. Sorry, I'm picking on you now. Excel and Morgan. And that's the person Morgan winds up reporting to. So it is a little bit like what you're saying. You do need to land in the information universe and get directed. That is true. But but there is also a movement happening. You see it sort of more macro with things like the conversation around paid leave and parental leave and things. So when you see the culture start shifting and the very largest level in the work world, the illness conversation is coming up behind that right now. Of course, we got another answer.
I work in HR, and so I would say that's where if your company has an HR department, that's where you would want to start. But I agree with you that in HR, even the idea of talking to managers about doing an interactive process on leaves and accommodations, it has come mostly from disability and inclusion in that sense, but because then illness is right behind it. So I agree that we are thinking about it differently and able to talk to employees and managers about what their rights are and what needs to be made, what accommodations need to be made in the workplace. And then sometimes they're not. I work in education, so we can't always tell a teacher that she can have a 2-hour lunch because it's not feasible. But if you're working in the tech department, it might be feasible. So really having that interactive process is so important.
I got one more thing. That same survey I showed you before, only 44% of those people told HR, but 71% told their supervisor. So it is important to recognize that there's a disconnect to great HR. And you may have had a bad HR experience once before, and that changes everything for you, even if you had great HR who was going to do all the right things. So there is a gap we're trying to close because HR has a lot of really important insight, experience, and knowledge, but people are not turning to HR in the same rates that they're going to their supervisor.
We're not all bad.
No, that's what I'm saying. I keep saying great HR. But that's the point, is that it's a trust building exercise to see that scaffold through the organization, right?
Okay. Kim Williams, recurrent cervical cancer survivor. I had a question for the self-care panel. And of course, anybody could answer it, and are there any tips that you guys could give to patients or survivors that are struggling with that? Because sometimes going through a diagnosis, we're so focused on not making anybody else feel bad that we don't take care of ourselves, and maybe some tips on what we can do to better take care of ourselves, as I say, put ourselves on the schedule so that we won't be feeling bad about, hey, I don't feel like it today, or it's.
I think that's a really great question. For me, and to this day, I have found 2 things to be really important in my own self-care. One is having an accountability partner. So someone that I am telling, okay, it is a goal of mine to go on a 15-minute walk during the workday every day. And I have told 3 of my coworkers that. So if it's 3:30 and they haven't seen me leave my office yet, then they come knocking and say, hey, did you go on your walk? Or did you put it on your calendar? Or I'm going on a walk, let's go. So I think letting other people know what your plans are so they can hold you accountable is super important. And I just lost what my second one was, so.
I would add to that I think as women, we have this sense of thinking that self-care is somehow being selfish or being, that we're not. And we need to break that myth, because we deserve to have that time for ourselves and to take care of ourselves. And it's not being selfish. Self-care is the most loving act you can give to yourself and the people around you. And so I think we have to just believe that and know that, but taking those actions and stuff, the accountability partner idea is a great one. And that's why I think somewhat having a place like the organization my organization, where you can sign up for our painting class, or our yoga class, or whatever. And sometimes having I've committed to doing that. And so I'm going to show up for that yoga class, or I'm going to show up for that poetry class workshop. So just taking the action of actually doing it. And again, you might need the accountability partner to say, I'm going to sign up for that, And so it's just taking those baby steps, but you are worth it. And we have to believe that we're not being selfish at all.
Yeah, that reminded me what my second point was. Yes. I think what my therapist has said to me when I talk about, I don't have time to do this. I have 2 kids, I have a full-time job, trying to do all of these things, is what would you say to a friend if they said that to you? I don't have time to go on a walk or to eat my lunch at work. What would you say to them? And that's how you should be speaking to yourself and telling yourself those same things. It's so much more difficult to say it to yourself, at least for me. But when I think about, okay, if a friend came to me and said, yeah, I don't eat lunch ever because I'm too busy, I would say, that's ridiculous. You need to eat lunch. That's a basic need. It's not even self-care. But I don't necessarily talk to myself in the same way. So I think imagining what you would say to a friend if they said, I want to go get a massage this weekend, but I feel really guilty because I have these other things I should be doing. What would you say to them? And then act on it that way.
So we're going to take one last question.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Yvette Torres. I'm from Glendale, Queens. I'm a 10-year survivor of stage 1B2 adenocarcinoma non-squamous cell. So it was a rare type. So happy to be here. But my question is for Lisa Sims Booth in regards to how do you find the patients or the cancer survivors that come to you and get the therapy through the arts, or how do they find you? Because I know when I was going through my treatment, even though I'm a music educator, I kind of retreated into my own little bubble, and I didn't have that outlet that usually would make me so happy. So how do you reach out?
Couple things. We have great relationships with a lot of the cancer centers, hospitals, and offices around our metro area. So a lot of people refer people to us. But the other way people find, the next way is word of mouth. People, my cousin knew someone that went to this place over in DC, then U Street, you should go there. But the other place is Google, free cancer programs. And we come up because our programs are free. And that's how a lot of people find us, is they just start Googling what's available that doesn't cost money that I can get into. Most of it, though, is referrals from cancer centers, doctors, social workers, and navigators, or word of mouth from other people just telling other friends.
Thank you again to both our panels.